The relentless sun beat down on the parched earth, mirroring the dryness in Jedediah's heart. His ranch, once a source of pride and a testament to his hard work, was now a dusty shadow of its former self. The creek that had once flowed freely was now a mere trickle, choked by the unforgiving drought. Cattle, gaunt and weak, dotted the barren landscape, a constant reminder of his failing fortunes. Jedediah, a man weathered by years of toil and disappointment, stood on his porch, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He was a man alone, his dreams of a family long since withered like the dying crops in his fields. He was a man of the land, his hands calloused and strong, but his spirit was weary. He longed for the laughter of children, the warmth of a loving wife, the simple joys that seemed to elude him at every turn. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. His wife, bless her soul, had passed years ago, leaving him with an empty house and a lingering ache in his heart. And the doctor had confirmed what he already suspected. He was infertile, unable to father children of his own. The weight of his loneliness pressed down on him, heavier than the scorching sun. He tried to find solace in his work, mending fences, tending to the cattle, but the emptiness remained, a constant void in his life. He yearned for someone to share his burdens, someone to inherit his land, someone to love. He knew he needed help, another pair of hands to keep the ranch afloat, but hired help was expensive, and his funds were dwindling. He'd heard whispers of desperate families in the nearby mining town, families willing to do anything to survive. Children, some no older than 10, worked in the dangerous mines, their small hands extracting precious or for meager wages. The thought sickened him, but a desperate idea began to take root in his mind. A dangerous idea, one that could either save him or damn him completely. The air in the mining town hung thick with coal dust and despair. Shanties cobbled together from scraps of wood and corrugated iron leaned precariously against the scarred landscape. The relentless clang of pickaxes echoed through the valley, a constant reminder of the back-breaking labor that sustained the town. Here, survival was a daily struggle, and childhood was a luxury few could afford. Sarah, barely 14 years old, was no exception. Her small frame was perpetually covered in grime, her hands raw and blistered from wielding a pickaxe in the dark, suffocating depths of the mine. Since her parents had succumbed to a mining accident 2 years prior, she had become the sole provider for her younger siblings, 8-year-old Thomas and 6-year-old Lily. They lived in a cramped shack, barely bigger than a doghouse, under the watchful eye of Mrs. Gable, a cruel and avaricious woman who had taken them in after their parents' death. Mrs. Gable provided shelter, but at a steep price. Sarah was forced to hand over almost all her earnings, leaving barely enough for a meager meal of beans and stale bread each day. The mine was a treacherous place, prone to cave-ins and explosions. Each day, Sarah descended into the darkness, her heart pounding with fear, knowing that she might never see her siblings again. But she had no choice. She had to provide for them, to keep them safe from the clutches of Mrs. Gable, who threatened to send them to the workhouse if Sarah couldn't meet her demands. Despite the hardships, Sarah possessed a fierce spirit and an unwavering determination. She dreamed of a better life for her and her siblings, a life free from the suffocating darkness of the mine and the tyranny of Mrs. Gable. She clung to the hope that one day, somehow, they would escape this desolate place and find a place where they could be happy and safe. She often told Thomas and Lily stories of green fields and clear skies, of a world where children could play and laugh without fear. These stories were their escape, their shared dream of a brighter future. But for now, the mine was their reality, and Sarah was their only hope. Each swing of the pickaxe was an act of love, a testament to her unwavering devotion to her brother and sister. Jedediah, after days of wrestling with his conscience, finally succumbed to the desperate plan that had been brewing in his mind. He hitched his wagon and set off towards the mining town, the wheels rumbling against the dusty road, each turn bringing him closer to a decision that could change his life forever, for better or worse. The image of Sarah, her face smudged with coal dust, her eyes filled with a weariness that belied her young age, haunted him. He arrived in the town, the air thick with the smells of coal and poverty, and made his way to Mrs. Gable's ramshackle dwelling. The woman, a formidable figure with a sharp tongue and even sharper eyes, greeted him with a suspicious glare. Jedediah, feeling a pang of guilt, explained his situation, carefully omitting the true extent of his loneliness and desire for a family. He claimed he needed a strong, capable girl to help with chores around the ranch, cooking, cleaning, mending fences. He offered Mrs. Gable a sum of money, a significant portion of his dwindling savings, in exchange for Sarah's employment. Mrs. Gable, her eyes gleaming with avarice, readily agreed. She saw Sarah as nothing more than a source of income, and the opportunity to rid herself of the responsibility of caring for 3 orphan children was too tempting to resist. She haggled with Jedediah, pushing for a higher price, until they finally reached an agreement. Sarah, summoned from the mine, stood before Jedediah, her expression a mixture of fear and resignation. She had overheard snippets of the conversation and understood that her life was about to change, though she had no idea what awaited her. Jedediah, seeing the apprehension in her eyes, felt a surge of remorse. He knew that what he was doing was morally questionable, but he convinced himself that he was offering her a better life, an escape from the horrors of the mine. He promised her decent food, a warm bed, and a chance to learn new skills. Whether she believed him or not, he couldn't tell. All he could do was hope that he was making the right decision, not just for himself, but for Sarah as well. The deal was struck, the money exchanged, and Sarah was now bound to Jedediah, her future uncertain, her fate hanging in the balance. The wagon ride to Jedediah's ranch was silent and tense. Sarah sat stiffly beside him, her eyes fixed on the passing landscape, her mind racing with uncertainty and fear. She clutched a small, worn cloth doll, a cherished memento of her mother, her only comfort in this bewildering situation. Jedediah, sensing her unease, tried to make conversation, pointing out landmarks and describing the ranch, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. As they approached the ranch, Sarah couldn't help but notice its dilapidated state. The house, though sturdily built, was in need of repair, the paint peeling and the porch sagging. The fields were dry and barren, and the cattle looked thin and unhealthy. It was a far cry from the idyllic image she had conjured in her mind during her long hours in the mine. Jedediah stopped the wagon in front of the house and helped Sarah down. She stood hesitantly, her gaze sweeping over the desolate scene. "Welcome to my home, Sarah," Jedediah said, his voice tinged with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Sarah didn't respond. She simply stared at him, her eyes filled with a cold distrust. She had been bought and sold like a piece of property, and she resented Jedediah for it. In her mind, he was no different from Mrs. Gable, another person who saw her as nothing more than a tool to be used. "I know this isn't much," Jedediah continued, "but I promise to treat you fairly. You'll have a warm bed, plenty of food, and I'll teach you everything I know about ranching." Sarah remained silent, her arms crossed defensively. "I didn't ask for any of this," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to go back to my brother and sister." Jedediah sighed. He knew it wouldn't be easy to earn her trust, but he was determined to try. He had made a promise to himself and to Sarah that he would do everything in his power to make her life better. But first, he had to break through the wall of resentment and fear that surrounded her. He led her inside the house, hoping that a warm meal and a good night's sleep would be a start. The journey ahead would be long and arduous, but Jedediah was prepared to face it, one step at a time. Jedediah, though awkward and unsure of himself, genuinely tried to make Sarah feel comfortable. He showed her to a small but clean room at the back of the house, offering her a worn quilt and a soft pillow. It was far better than the straw-filled mattress she had shared with her siblings in Mrs. Gable's shack, but Sarah remained unmoved. He prepared a simple meal of stew and bread, setting it on the table with a hopeful smile. Sarah ate in silence, her eyes downcast, barely touching the food. Jedediah watched her, his heart aching. He had expected her to be grateful, to be relieved to be away from the mine, but he had underestimated the depth of her resentment and the strength of her attachment to her siblings. After the meal, Jedediah offered to help Sarah wash up, but she refused, retreating to her room and closing the door firmly behind her. Jedediah sighed, feeling defeated. He had hoped to make a connection with her, to ease her fears, but his efforts seemed to be in vain. Despite Sarah's coldness, Jedediah was determined to keep his promise. He made sure she had clean clothes, mended her worn boots, and even left a small, brightly colored ribbon on her bed, hoping to bring a smile to her face. But each morning, the ribbon remained untouched, a silent reminder of the wall that separated them. He avoided assigning her any heavy labor, focusing instead on simple chores around the house and garden. He showed her how to tend to the chickens, how to water the vegetables, and how to mend fences, but Sarah performed each task mechanically, without enthusiasm or interest. She answered his questions with monosyllabic responses and avoided eye contact whenever possible. Jedediah understood that it would take time to earn her trust, but he refused to give up. He knew that Sarah was hurting, that she missed her siblings, and that she felt betrayed and alone. He hoped that, with patience and kindness, he could eventually break through her defenses and show her that he genuinely cared for her well-being. He would continue to treat her with respect and compassion, hoping that one day she would see him not as a master, but as a friend. Word travels fast in the West, especially gossip. Silas, a neighboring rancher known for his gruff demeanor and envious nature, had heard whispers about Jedediah's acquisition from the mining town. He saw Jedediah's actions as not only strange, but also morally reprehensible, and he wasted no time in spreading his disapproval throughout the community. Silas, a large, imposing man with a booming voice, frequented the local saloon, where he held court with the other ranchers, sharing stories and trading rumors. He painted Jedediah as a depraved old man, preying on a vulnerable young girl. He insinuated that Jedediah's intentions were far from honorable and that Sarah was likely being mistreated. The other ranchers, already wary of Jedediah's reclusive nature and his struggling ranch, were quick to believe Silas's accusations. The local storekeeper, fearing the disapproval of the community, even refused to sell Jedediah supplies on credit. Sarah, too, felt the sting of the community's ostracism. When she ventured into town to purchase a few necessities, she was met with cold stares and whispered insults. Children taunted her, calling her names and throwing stones. She quickly learned to avoid the town, preferring to remain isolated on the ranch. Jedediah, aware of the growing animosity, tried to ignore it, focusing on his work and on trying to build a relationship with Sarah. But the constant disapproval weighed heavily on him. He had hoped to find acceptance and support in the community, but instead, he was met with suspicion and scorn. The isolation only deepened Sarah's resentment. She blamed Jedediah for her predicament, for bringing her to this desolate place and exposing her to the prejudice of the community. She felt trapped and alone, with no one to turn to. The rumors and whispers only served to reinforce her belief that she was nothing more than a burden, an unwanted outsider. The path to earning her trust was becoming increasingly difficult, as the community's judgment cast a long shadow over their lives. Weeks turned into months, and the drought continued to grip the land. Jedediah's ranch was on the brink of collapse. The well was running dry, the cattle were starving, and the crops had withered and died. He worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk, trying to salvage what he could, but his efforts seemed futile. Sarah, despite her initial resentment, couldn't help but notice Jedediah's unwavering dedication. She saw the worry etched on his face, the exhaustion in his eyes, and the desperation in his every action. She also noticed that he never asked her to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He treated her with respect, always thanking her for her help and never raising his voice in anger. One sweltering afternoon, Jedediah collapsed from exhaustion while trying to repair a broken fence. Sarah, witnessing his collapse, rushed to his side, her initial fear giving way to concern. She helped him back to the house, fetching him water and a cool cloth for his forehead. As Jedediah rested, Sarah began to look around the house, noticing the small detail she had previously overlooked. She saw the framed photograph of Jedediah's late wife, her smiling face radiating warmth and kindness. She saw the worn Bible on the bedside table, its pages filled with handwritten notes. She saw the simple but well-cared-for furniture, each piece telling a story of a life lived with hard work and integrity. For the first time, Sarah began to see Jedediah not as a master, but as a man, a lonely, struggling man who was doing his best to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world. She saw his vulnerability, his kindness, and his genuine desire to help her. When Jedediah awoke, Sarah was sitting beside him, her expression softer than he had ever seen it. She offered him a cup of water and a small, hesitant smile. "Thank you, Sarah," Jedediah said, his voice weak but sincere. Sarah nodded, her eyes meeting his for the first time without a trace of resentment. "You should rest," she said quietly. "I'll take care of the chores." Jedediah was surprised by her offer, but he gratefully accepted. As he drifted back to sleep, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the wall between them was beginning to crumble. The following days brought little rain, but a subtle shift in the atmosphere on the ranch. Sarah, now more willing to engage, started helping Jedediah with the demanding tasks. She'd draw water from the dwindling well, her small hands surprisingly strong as she hauled the heavy buckets. She tended to the chickens and gathered the few eggs they still laid, carefully rationing them to ensure they lasted. She even started helping Jedediah repair the broken fences, her quick mind grasping the techniques he demonstrated. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sarah broke the silence. "Why did you buy me, Jedediah?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Jedediah hesitated, unsure how to answer. He couldn't bring himself to tell her the whole truth about his loneliness and his desperate desire for a family. Instead, he said, "I saw how hard you worked in the mine, Sarah. I wanted to give you a chance at a better life. A life where you didn't have to risk your life every day." Sarah looked at him, her eyes searching his. "But you paid Mrs. Gable," she said. "You bought me like an animal." Jedediah flinched, stung by her words. "I know it wasn't right, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with remorse. "I made a mistake. But I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make it up to you." Sarah remained silent for a long moment. Then she said, "What about my brother and sister? Do you ever think about them?" Jedediah nodded. "Ido, Sarah. I've been thinking about them a lot. I'll see what I can do." That night, Jedediah lay awake, wrestling with his conscience. He knew he had to do something to help Sarah's siblings, but he wasn't sure what. He was already struggling to keep his own ranch afloat. But he couldn't ignore Sarah's pain. He had to find a way to ease her burden and to make amends for his past actions. The first step, he realized, was to travel to the mining town and see Thomas and Lily for himself. He knew it would be a difficult and potentially dangerous journey, but he was determined to do it, for Sarah's sake. His awkward kindness was finally taking root. Before Jedediah could make his trip to the mining town, disaster struck again. A virulent cattle disease swept through the region, decimating herds and leaving ranchers devastated. Jedediah's already weakened cattle were particularly vulnerable, and within days, several of them succumbed to the illness. Jedediah was heartbroken. He had invested everything he had into those animals, and now they were dying before his eyes. He knew that if he didn't act quickly, he would lose his entire herd, and with it his livelihood. Sarah, witnessing his despair, stepped up without hesitation. Drawing on her resourcefulness and her experience working in the mine, she devised a plan to isolate the sick animals and prevent the disease from spreading. She helped Jedediah build makeshift quarantine pens, using whatever materials they could find on the ranch. She also remembered a herbal remedy her grandmother used to make for sick animals, a concoction of roots and herbs that was said to have healing properties. She spent hours scouring the surrounding hillsides, gathering the necessary ingredients. Jedediah, initially skeptical, was amazed by Sarah's knowledge and her unwavering determination. He worked alongside her, following her instructions and trusting her instincts. Together, they nursed the sick animals, administering the herbal remedy and providing them with food and water. The work was grueling and exhausting, but Sarah and Jedediah persevered, driven by a shared sense of purpose. They slept little, ate sparingly, and worked tirelessly, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Slowly, miraculously, the tide began to turn. The spread of the disease slowed, and some of the sick animals began to recover. Jedediah and Sarah had managed to save a significant portion of the herd, averting total disaster. Jedediah was deeply grateful to Sarah. He had always known that she was a strong and capable girl, but he had never fully appreciated the depth of her resourcefulness and her unwavering loyalty. He realized that she was not just a hired hand, but a true partner, a valuable asset to the ranch, and a friend. Their shared struggle had forged a bond that transcended their initial, uncomfortable arrangement. He knew that, together, they could face any challenge that came their way. The drought, the cattle disease, these hardships, though devastating, had ultimately brought them closer, revealing the strength and resilience of their unlikely partnership. With the immediate threat of the cattle disease subsiding, Jedediah began to focus on rebuilding the ranch and teaching Sarah the skills she would need to thrive. He showed her how to ride a horse, patiently guiding her until she felt comfortable in the saddle. He taught her how to rope cattle, demonstrating the proper technique and encouraging her to practice until she mastered the skill. He explained the intricacies of ranch management, sharing his knowledge of livestock, crops, and the land itself. Sarah, eager to learn, absorbed everything Jedediah taught her. She discovered a natural aptitude for ranching, a skill that had been dormant within her, waiting to be awakened. She found a sense of purpose and fulfillment in working with the land, in caring for the animals, and in contributing to the success of the ranch. As she spent more time outdoors, surrounded by the vast expanse of the prairie and the towering peaks of the mountains, Sarah began to develop a deep connection to the land. She felt a sense of belonging, a sense of rootedness that she had never experienced before. The ranch became her home, and Jedediah, her mentor and friend. She started to take pride in her work, taking initiative and suggesting improvements to the ranch's operations. She proposed new methods for conserving water, for rotating crops, and for managing the livestock. Jedediah, impressed by her insights, readily implemented her suggestions, recognizing her growing expertise and her unwavering commitment to the ranch. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Sarah turned to Jedediah and said, "I never thought I could be happy here, Jedediah, but I am. This ranch, it feels like home." Jedediah smiled, his heart filled with warmth. "I'm glad you feel that way, Sarah," he said. "This ranch is your home now, too, and you're a part of my family." Sarah's eyes widened, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. She had finally found a place where she belonged, a place where she was valued, and a person who cared for her. The hardships they had faced had forged a bond that was stronger than any blood tie, a bond built on mutual respect, trust, and love. The ranch, once a symbol of Jedediah's loneliness and despair, had become a sanctuary, a place of healing and hope for both of them. Silas, consumed by envy and resentment at Jedediah's unexpected success and the bond he had formed with Sarah, decided to take matters into his own hands. He couldn't stand to see Jedediah thriving while he struggled to maintain his own ranch. He also harbored a deep-seated prejudice against Sarah, viewing her as an outsider and a threat to the community. Under the cover of darkness, Silas crept onto Jedediah's property and sabotaged the well, clogging it with debris and rendering it unusable. He also cut the fences, allowing the cattle to stray onto neighboring lands, knowing that this would cause further hardship for Jedediah. The next morning, Jedediah and Sarah discovered the damage and were devastated. They knew that without water, they couldn't survive for long, and without fences, their cattle would be lost. Jedediah, his face etched with despair, was ready to give up. He felt like he had been fighting a losing battle for too long. But Sarah refused to surrender. She was determined to protect her home and the man she had come to care for. She suspected Silas was behind the sabotage and, fueled by anger and loyalty, confronted him at his ranch. Silas, initially denying any involvement, soon revealed his true colors, spewing hateful words and boasting about his actions. Sarah, though small in stature, stood her ground, her eyes blazing with defiance. She accused Silas of being a coward and a bully, of preying on the weak and vulnerable. Silas, enraged by her words, lunged at her, intending to silence her. But Sarah was quick and agile. She dodged his attack and, using a ranching tool she had brought with her, defended herself with surprising skill. Jedediah, hearing the commotion, arrived at Silas's ranch just in time to see Sarah fending off his attacker. He stepped in to protect her, and a fierce fight ensued. Sarah, refusing to stand aside, joined the fray, using her knowledge of the land and her quick wits to gain the upper hand. Together, they managed to subdue Silas, preventing him from causing any further harm. The confrontation with Silas served as a turning point for Sarah. She had discovered a courage and a strength she never knew she possessed. She had stood up for herself and for the man she had come to love, proving her loyalty and her unwavering commitment to the ranch. Jedediah, witnessing her bravery, was filled with pride and admiration. He knew that he could always count on her, no matter what challenges they faced. The day after the confrontation with Silas, Jedediah sat Sarah down on the porch. The morning sun cast long shadows across the yard, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. He had something important to say, something that had been weighing heavily on his mind. "Sarah," he began, his voice earnest, "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About you, about me, about this ranch." He paused, searching for the right words. "Why I brought you here, I did it for the wrong reasons. I was lonely, and I was desperate. I thought I could buy myself a family, but I was wrong. What I did was wrong." He continued, "You've shown me what it means to be strong, to be loyal, to be brave. You've become more than just a hired hand to me, Sarah. You're like family." He hesitated again, then took a deep breath. "But I realized that you didn't have a choice in any of this. You didn't choose to come here. You didn't choose to work for me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch filled with money. "This is all the money I have saved, Sarah. It's not much, but it's yours." He held out the pouch to her. "I want you to have a choice. You can take this money and leave, start a new life somewhere else. Or you can stay here on the ranch as a paid employee with equal rights and equal say in how things are run." He looked at her, his eyes filled with sincerity. "The choice is yours, Sarah. I won't be offended if you choose to leave. I just want you to be happy. I want you to have the life you deserve." Sarah stared at the pouch of money, her mind racing. She had dreamed of escaping the mine, of finding a better life for herself and her siblings. But now, standing on the porch of the ranch that had become her home, with the man who had become her friend, she realized that her dreams had changed. She no longer yearned for escape. She yearned for belonging. She yearned for family. The choice Jedediah had given her was not about money or freedom. It was about loyalty and love. And she knew, in her heart, what she had to do. Sarah looked at the pouch of money, then back at Jedediah, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and determination. She thought about her siblings, Thomas and Lily, and the promise she had made to protect them. She thought about the freedom that the money could buy, the chance to start a new life, far away from the mine and the prejudice of the community. But she also thought about the ranch, about the animals, about the land that had become so dear to her. She thought about Jedediah, the kind, awkward man who had shown her what it meant to be valued and respected. She knew that leaving would be easy, but staying would be right. She took a deep breath and handed the pouch back to Jedediah. "I don't want the money," she said, her voice firm. "I don't want to leave." Jedediah's eyes lit up with surprise and joy. "Are you sure, Sarah?" he asked. "I wouldn't want you to stay if you weren't happy." Sarah nodded. "I'm sure, Jedediah. This ranch is my home now, and you're my family. But there was one condition. I don't want to be just a paid employee, Jedediah, she said. I want to be your partner. I want to help you rebuild this ranch to make it thrive. I want to share in the responsibilities, and I want to share in the rewards. Jedediah smiled, his heart overflowing with gratitude and affection. I wouldn't have it any other way, Sarah, he said. You're the best partner a man could ask for. And so, Sarah and Jedediah embarked on a new chapter in their lives, working side by side to rebuild the ranch and their lives together. They repaired the well, mended the fences, and planted new crops. They bought new cattle and implemented Sarah's innovative farming techniques. Slowly but surely, the ranch began to flourish. The fields turned green, the cattle grew fat, and the well flowed freely. Sarah and Jedediah had not only saved the ranch, but they had also built a strong, lasting partnership based on mutual respect, trust, and love. Their unlikely bond had transformed their lives, bringing them both a sense of purpose and belonging that they had never thought possible. The ranch was no longer just a place to live. It was a symbol of their resilience, their courage, and their unwavering commitment to each other. As the ranch prospered, so did the bond between Jedediah and Sarah. Their relationship evolved beyond partnership into a deep, familial connection. Jedediah, no longer consumed by loneliness, found joy in sharing his life with Sarah, watching her blossom into a confident and capable young woman. Sarah, in turn, found in Jedediah the father figure she had longed for, a source of guidance, support, and unconditional love. He traveled to the mining town and spoke with Mrs. Gable, offering her a generous sum of money in exchange for Thomas and Lily's release. Mrs. Gable, seeing an opportunity to profit, readily agreed. Jedediah brought Thomas and Lily back to the ranch, where they were welcomed with open arms by Sarah. The siblings were overjoyed to be reunited, and they quickly settled into their new life on the ranch. They helped with chores, learned new skills, and enjoyed the freedom and security that they had never known before. The ranch became a haven for the three siblings, a place where they could heal from their past traumas and build a brighter future. Jedediah and Sarah treated them as their own children, providing them with love, support, and guidance. As the years passed, the ranch became a symbol of hope and resilience, a testament to the power of second chances and the transformative power of love. Jedediah and Sarah had proven that family wasn't just about blood. It was about connection, commitment, and unwavering support. Their unconventional family had found happiness and fulfillment in each other, proving that even the most unlikely of circumstances could lead to extraordinary outcomes. The ranch thrived not just because of hard work, but because it was built on a foundation of genuine love and respect, a family created not by ownership, but by choice. With the ranch thriving and their financial situation secure, Jedediah felt a growing sense of responsibility to give back to the community. He couldn't forget the desperation and poverty he had witnessed in the mining town, and he knew that there were still many children trapped in exploitative situations, just like Sarah had been. Inspired by Sarah's past and driven by a desire to make amends for his earlier actions, Jedediah decided to use his wealth to help these children. He began by establishing a fund to provide financial assistance to families in need, enabling them to keep their children out of the mines and in school. He also worked with local community leaders to establish a vocational training center, where young people could learn valuable skills and find alternative employment opportunities. He hired skilled craftsmen to teach carpentry, blacksmithing, and other trades, providing the children with the tools and knowledge they needed to build a better future. Sarah, deeply moved by Jedediah's generosity, joined him in his efforts. She shared her story with the children, inspiring them to believe in themselves and to never give up on their dreams. She became a mentor and a role model, offering them guidance, support, and a listening ear. Together, Jedediah and Sarah made a significant impact on the lives of countless children in the mining town. They provided them with hope, opportunity, and a chance to escape the cycle of poverty and exploitation. They showed them that there was a better way, a way to build a future filled with promise and purpose. Their actions also inspired other ranchers and community members to get involved, creating a ripple effect of generosity and compassion throughout the region. The community, once divided by prejudice and suspicion, began to come together, united by a shared commitment to helping those in need. Jedediah and Sarah had not only transformed their own lives, but they had also transformed the lives of countless others. They had turned their personal tragedy into a powerful force for good, proving that even the most unlikely of circumstances could lead to extraordinary acts of kindness and compassion. Their legacy would live on for generations to come, a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the unwavering belief in the potential of every human being. The thriving ranch became a symbol of what was possible when compassion took root. As Jedediah and Sarah continued their philanthropic efforts, the community began to witness the positive impact of their actions. They saw the children from a mining town thriving, learning new skills and building brighter futures. They saw Jedediah and Sarah working tirelessly to improve the lives of others, and they couldn't help but be moved by their generosity and compassion. Slowly but surely, the prejudice and suspicion that had once divided the community began to fade away. People started to see Jedediah and Sarah not as outsiders, but as valuable members of the community, as individuals who were making a real difference in the lives of others. The local storekeeper, who had once refused to sell Jedediah supplies on credit, now offered him the best prices in town. The ranchers who had once avoided Jedediah now sought his advice and his friendship. Even Silas, humbled by his defeat and touched by Jedediah's kindness, offered a grudging apology and began to contribute to Jedediah's charitable efforts. Sarah and Jedediah were eventually accepted by the community. They were invited to town gatherings, they were asked to serve on local committees, and they were treated with the respect and dignity they deserved. The film concludes years later, with a shot of Jedediah and Sarah, now older but still working side by side on the thriving ranch. Thomas and Lily are grown, successful in their own right, and visit often with their own families. The ranch is a vibrant hub of activity, a testament to the power of second chances, the strength of found family, and the transformative power of love and forgiveness. The final scene shows Jedediah and Sarah sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, their faces etched with contentment and peace. They had come a long way from their troubled past, but they had finally found happiness and fulfillment in each other and in the community they had helped to build. The final shot is a panoramic view of the ranch, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. The end.